everybody, to the MMA Vivisection. I'm here with my good friends Victor Rodriguez and Eddie Mercado. We are talking Bellator 147 on a week without MMA event, where next week I'm going to either be doing three of these things or one that is 3 hours long. Fans can take their pick. So this week we've just got a Bellator card to go through, and it's kind of a weird card. Like, I looked at it on SureDog, I saw 8 fights. I thought, hey, that's kind of nice. Just a little, like, taste MMA, good times, nothing too big. And then I went over to Tapology, and this card is like 40 fights long, and we're probably going to skip most of it because I can't imagine anyone who wants an in-depth breakdown of Jose Perez versus Bronson Mojica. Anyway, Victor, what are your thoughts on this card?
Well, good afternoon, beautiful gambling degenerates. We have ourselves a pretty big card Bellator returning to San Jose, and bringing some guys from some of the more notable gyms in the region. Of course, we may see a lot of these fights that you've just mentioned on the post limbs, if they have any. There are some pretty interesting cards. It's not the most stacked event. If you're a Bellator fan, you're probably a little more in-depth than the average fan. And, of course, if you're watching this event or if you have any thoughts about it, then you're probably familiar with most of the faces, or at least have heard of some of the names that are on this card as well. So, all in all, it looks like it's got a lot of promise in the middle. It's not a very top-heavy card. It's actually sort of sandwiched, I guess, you could say, but it's definitely worth checking out. I think we're going to see some pretty solid action here.
Eddie, are you as excited as Victor? Because Victor sounded pretty excited. No?
Hold on, I was muted. What'd you say?
You had me muted?
I'm muted. Yeah, it's these headphones. I don't know. I'm recovering from this cold I had, and I'm just falling apart. My headpiece wasn't working. I'm here, but I'm not here.
Okay, well, we won't ask you too much then. No hard questions. What do you think of the fight card, Eddie?
No. Honestly, I'm not too excited. I think the main card has some interesting fights on it. However, the prelims, there's just nothing there for me. So I'm not gonna be like, hey, you need to tune in to the prelims because of this guy and that guy. So.
Yeah,
No,
there are a couple of fighters that we've seen around. James Terry, Thomas Diog or
Yeah, Diagne, yeah, go ahead.
Diagne, yeah. Some guys we've seen. Diagne especially was Strikeforce regular, so it's fun. It's weird to see some, like, how quickly Scott Coker has brought back a lot of the filler that he had in Strikeforce. Like, he's going out and finding these guys again, and it's a little odd, I gotta admit. But anyway, there's not a lot of, there aren't many really compelling fighters on there. Not a lot of guys where you're like, oh, I really need to see how Alvin Kakdak does. Who, once again, classic Strikeforce dude. 2008 Strikeforce Alvin Kakdak. But yeah, we're gonna skip most of that. I think the first fight I'm interested in talking about very briefly, not to too much depth, is AJ McKee Jr., JT Donaldson. McKee, he's got some hype just on his namesake, son of the longtime, very successful AJ McKee.
Did we lose Zane?
I believe we may have. He's stuck in the Phantom Zone.
Oh, well. Shit.
What happens, Zane?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, you can hear me now. Okay, yeah. I'm back. Yeah. Anyway, people are interested in AJ McKee Jr. He seems like a fighter with some hype, especially with the namesake of his dad, to get a little more fan interest. Victor, you got any thoughts on that fight?
Yeah, this looks like it's going to be yet another sort of a I don't want to say necessarily a showcase, but it's certainly a bit of a test to see AJ's improvement. It's very, very most likely to be a fight to really, I guess, he is the attraction of this bout, and that's
Yeah.
no disrespect to his opponent, but McKee is a guy who's grown up with a dad who's been a very solid wrestler and a mixed martial artist on his own. He's currently McKee's AJ, I should say, has a 5-1 record as an amateur, and he's currently 2-0 as a professional. He's got pretty much he's got a bunch of finishes. I think there's only one. No, he's got 2 decisions on his amateur record. But he's improving steadily, and his grappling is pretty scary. His transitions are good. The kid's exciting. He's definitely worth checking out. And his opponent's not a slouch either. I like the fact that they at least paired him up with someone who is going to be able to at least, stay on his toes. We're talking about JT Donaldson, we should mention, who's 1-1 as a professional, nicknamed his grandma's boy, but which, hey, I got a lot of respect for a man who loves his grandma. That's all good, It's a way. It's a good thing to have. But it's going to be a pretty solid test. Make no mistake. This is really to see AJ McKee shine, and we'll see how this plays out. I really do expect some good things out of him, and this could very well be a good step for anyone who hasn't seen him yet.
Eddie?
I don't have too much to say about this. McKee got a pretty gnarly knockout his last go on that Gillard Gertz Bellator. But I don't know. I mean, I'm excited to see him. He seems to be a finisher, and that always grabs my attention. So.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me to see a guy like I'm happy to see Bellator sign a lot of these guys at like the 0 point and build them. I'm interested to see how they do it because they're signing guys with no pro fights at all. That was McKee. 0-0. They signed him up, and it's going to be interesting to see how they bring those guys along because that's like we haven't seen that much or very rarely in the UFC, and it was it was really only something that like Pride did as far as the big organizations being willing to just like jump on some guy with no experience whatsoever and throw him in a cage. And they just did it. They didn't do anybody any favors doing that. It was always like, oh, you're going to fight Fedor.
Yeah, Jose Canseco versus Hangman Choi. Congratulations. Yeah, this is how you come out here and do this freak show fight, and we'll help you make your child support payments. I should also note, before I forget, Michael Hutchinson, Bloody Elbow's own, did a nice little piece on AJ McKee. I'm going to be retweeting that a little later. Definitely worth checking out. Give you a little bit more insight on the kid. That's a pretty interesting piece.
So next up, we got the main card. Starting off, dive right in. Adam Piccolotti, Mario Soto, probably the least notable fight on the main card. Piccolotti had a little notice as a pretty successful regional BJJ grappler. Eddie, any thoughts on this fight?
I think it's going to be interesting. Piccolotti, I actually saw a grappling tournament he did where he actually went against Nate Diaz and did reasonably well before ultimately getting submitted via rear naked choke. But he definitely held his own, and it definitely looked like Nate had a little bit of size on him. So I'm real curious. The guy he's fighting is an alpha male guy, Mario Soto, and they both kind of have a similar style. They both seem to be grapple guys who aren't necessarily polished on the feet, and they kind of take a little bit of damage right off the bat and then somehow manage to get the fight to the ground and do their thing. So I'm not exactly sure how this is going to play out. I think that Piccolotti has faced somewhat better competition. So I'm probably going to pick Piccolotti to win this one. But I think it's interesting. I think it'll be very competitive.
I have to say I'm a little surprised that it's not a bad choice, but I'm a little surprised that Mario Soto went with Doctor for his nickname instead of Super.
Yeah, that's it's actually a good sign because if anything, it seems like a nickname that someone else gave you. Because when someone gives themselves their own nickname, that is more than just a little lame, and I kind of that is you lose a lot of respect. Your hood cred goes down when you do that kind of shit.
Yeah. So Dr. Mario, any thoughts on it, Vic?
Yeah, Dr. Mario, the least fun of puzzle games. You know what? I'm gonna go out here on a crazy limb. I'm actually gonna pick him to win this fight. I've seen Piccolotti grapple. I don't know how well his grappling is going to translate to MMA when he's fighting someone who's perhaps a little more complete than him. Um, I think the alpha male pedigree, that hard-nosed wrestling style, and that savvy to be able to defend against submissions and be able to keep your position in an MMA context that'll help you continue to score with the judges. I think that's really going to be much more of a determining factor, and I think it's eventually. I don't know much about Piccolotti's cardio. I haven't really seen him drag too deep in this, so I'm actually going to go Soto on this one.
All right. The odds on this have Piccolotti the favorite minus 169 up to minus 175. Soto the underdog plus 135 to plus 141. Not a wide spread, but not also a fight that's got a lot of investment. Interesting to see how it goes. Next up, light heavyweight bout: Virgil Zwicker, Brian Rogers. Vic?
Oh boy! All right. The only thing that's
Thrilled. I know you're
guaranteed,
thrilled.
the only thing that's guaranteed about this fight is that it's going to be ugly. And I mean, all right. Look, Virgil Zwicker, another hard-nosed wrestler, another guy who's got a propensity to getting into very sloppy bouts, but he finds a way to win. He's currently 14-4. Brian Rogers is 11-8. We've seen him in Bellator do some pretty impressive things, but I think he's really carried himself along. He's really made a lot of his success has been due to him being able to use his physicality, or the other guy perhaps not being on the level that he should be, in terms of maybe the other guy gasses out a little more, or he's able to overpower his opponents. These things seem to work in tandem for him. I don't think he's going to be able to bully Zwicker around that much, and that's really where things are going to start to get sloppy. We're going to probably see a lot of body lock standing, a lot of stuff against the cage, and then eventually the takedown, and just a lot of sweaty, grindy, sloppy. This isn't going to really look much like a fight. This is just going to get pretty sad between two older guys, I guess. That I don't know. This is one bout that I'm really not excited about. And again, no disrespect to either guy. It's just not compelling. I don't think their styles are going to make for an entertaining or exciting fight. And this is just really not the kind of thing that anyone should be excited for. So yeah.
Yeah, Rogers surprisingly hasn't been around that long. I mean, he's like from 2009. He should sort of be in the prime of his career, which has also coincided with a major dip in his showings, unfortunately for him. But Zwicker, yeah, he's been around since like 2003, off and on. But anyway, Eddie, thoughts?
Real quick, who are you picking, Vic?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Got to pick somebody.
Eddie, why you got to do this to me, man?
I'm a stickler. I'm a stickler for picks.
Put me on the spot like that traffic cop. I see what you're doing. All right. Damn. I'll just flip a coin, I suppose. I'm gonna go with Zwicker on this. I'll go with the safe money just for the sake of whatever. But I mean, I can see Rogers doing damage standing. I just don't know if he'll be able to put him away. I think Zwicker recovers pretty quick sometimes, and yeah, I'm going with Zwicker.
Eddie?
All right. Oh, man. Virgil Zwicker.
Hyped.
Man.
Come on, Eddie. Hyped. I want hype.
I can't get hyped on this one. I feel like Virgil Zwicker should fight Houston Alexander every single time.
Wow.
Have these guys fight every time.
Wow.
Just like two Goliaths colliding for all eternity in like that battle of the heavens.
I feel like you can see this fight at a bus stop.
Or that.
Yeah.
This is like the argument against MMA legalization right there. Look, you see this? Who wants to pay to see this? Oh.
Well, it keeps them off the streets. I will say this, though. Brian Rogers has had severe cardio issues, but he's moving up to 205 for this fight. So I think his cardio will be a little bit better than we've seen in the past. And he has been starting to throw leg kicks, as we saw in his last fight against Joey Beltran. Of course, that all went out the window when he got tired. There was no more leg kicks to be thrown. But, I mean, it's just going to be ugly, like Vic said. It's going to be terribly ugly. And I'm going to pick Brian Rogers for the simple fact that he's moving up to 205.
All right, I gotta say I'm going with Zwicker just because he's got that like he's one of those dudes that is sloppy as hell, but also like generally has a much better record than you'd give him credit for. Like he doesn't lose often, and when he does, it's usually either by an ugly, ugly decision or just something random. Like he rarely just gets like totally beat, and he's got it's that ability to be big enough and tough enough to fight at light heavyweight, and I really kind of doubt that Rogers is either of those things. And that's usually the deciding factor of like if you're outside the top 10 of light heavyweight, pretty much what decides every fight is are you big enough to fight there.
Mm.
So I don't know. I'm leaning Zwicker on this one, just being a dude who has always been big enough and tough enough to stay in the cage at light heavyweight, and we haven't seen that out of Rogers.
I can't even argue that.
Yeah.
That's legit.
Odds on this are dead even all the way across. Minus 120 down to minus 114. Same odds, both fighters, all the way.
Yeah, I'll bet you what happened. The odds makers probably sat down and they said, "Oh, you know what? We don't watch those guys. We take naps when those dudes fight. So just put something down there. Okay, sure."
I
And then
can't
they just,
imagine why you take a nap during this fight, though. You know it's going to be fun. You know it's just going to be a trash fire. Like,
I mean, if you want to see what proper refereeing looks like, yeah, I guess.
it's going to be hilarious and awesome, and you're going to love it.
This
I
is the part where
guarantee it.
you're gonna make me pour more vodka into my coffee, and I mean, like it's Thursday. I don't want to have to do that right now, but whatever.
Vodka and coffee? Rum. Rum, what is. Who puts vodka in coffee?
Hey,
Who puts coffee in their rum?
I got rum.
Good, there you go.
Don't
See?
tempt me. I got it.
All right. Next up, we got a pretty legit fight. Tricky Friere, Derek Anderson. Eddie, what are your thoughts?
This is a rematch, which is always interesting. The first time these guys fought, they basically stood in front of each other and just went to town. I mean, it was a very impressive debut for Derek Anderson. It was his coming out party. He was a nobody and then eked out a close decision. After overcoming adversity, he got dropped in the first and hurt in the second, and he came back after Pitbull gassed there in the second round and just kind of kept coming forward and kept coming forward as he does, which I really like to see. I mean, he's just Derek Anderson is one of the most game guys, and I've heard Zane allude to this, that he's got that James Vick feel where he's just big and tough and kind of awkward, but he can get the job done. He fought Brandon Gertz, turned him into the gift with that knee, sent Gertz flying. So he definitely has tools to hurt somebody. He had a tough outing against Brent Primus in his last go. It was a real close split decision. Some people say he won. Some people say he lost. He kind of got out-grappled there in the beginning, came back towards the end. Patricky, in his last bout, he bested Saad Awad, and that was a real technical bout where Patricky was very smart and didn't overdo it, didn't gas out really. He stuck to the script, and he got a close decision. Man, I think that Patricky is not going to gas out the way he did last time. And although I think Derek Anderson has every bit of firepower and will push the kind of pace to go straight at Patricky, I'm not sure he's got the kind of polish he's going to need to get the job done again. So I'm going to pick Patricky. Maybe not a finish, maybe a finish, but I just think Patricky might mix it up a little more and go for the takedown.
Vic, what are your thoughts?
All right, well, I'm going to start off by partially agreeing here. Number one, the fact that it is a rematch does make things much more interesting because you have a guy with the caliber of one of the Pitbull brothers taking on a guy who came not only out of obscurity but came out of the Explode Fight team and had a bunch of fights in that organization, which we know has had more than questionable bouts. In fact, I think we can speak bluntly here and just say they've had some absolutely horrible matchmaking that borders on criminal in terms of having inexperienced fighters go out there and just commit promotional malpractice, to borrow a phrase. That notwithstanding, Derek Anderson has put together a very respectable run past his time at Explode. He's accumulated a bit of a nice record in Bellator, and he's currently 12-2 as a professional with one draw, one knockout, 4 TKOs, 6 submissions. This could very well be one of those cases, and much like James Vick, which I'm glad Eddie mentioned, that didn't really have that much hype behind him coming in, but somehow flourished and has become far better than people expected, taking on very legitimate opposition. So he's only got losses to Brent Primus and Marcin Held. He did beat Gertz, he beat Patrick, and he also beat Danny Navarro in his last Bellator win. Now, Patrick Pitbull very well may change up his tactics. He may come up with a different kind of pressure that Anderson might not be ready for. For some reason, I don't know if this probably might just apply to both Pitbull brothers. I don't really know if I can trust them to be consistent at this rate, even though I never count them out. I'm actually going to go with Derek Anderson on this one. I do think that he might be able to utilize his range. I do think that he might not just do some of the things that he was doing well in their first bout, but be able to expand on that. And he's probably seen enough tape. He's seen some of the tendencies that the Pitbull brothers both have, that they share. So I'm actually going to go out on this one too, and if the money's good, it's probably worth putting something on it, but I'd actually pick Derek Anderson to win this one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I talked to Patricky a bit about this fight, and the biggest thing that I heard from him about it was really that Anderson loss capped off a point in his career when he was training out with Team Nogueira and was just incredibly depressed and had been away from home for a year and a half and just felt like he was really lost and not in a good place in his career. And since then, he and his brother they got their own gym now. They they do all their own training and all that. And he especially has looked a lot better since that Anderson loss. Because I remember after that Anderson loss, I was kind of thinking, yeah, Patricky might be kind of done. He might be declining early because he's got that brawling, high, get hit a lot, tough fight style. And he's turned things around since then. So it'll be interesting to see because, Anderson, I do expect him to keep getting better. He is, he's one of those fighters. He's big, he's tough, he is aggressive to a fault, very willing to come forward and just wade in on guys. And that makes it those are tough fights for anybody. When you have a guy who won't go away and who's tough enough to just stand in and big enough to take your shots, he can be tough to beat.
This is also true, and we should also note that both Pitbull brothers have been fighting since they were 16, 17. They've been at this quite some time, and you got to wonder at what point that's going to play into it's actually going to start taking a toll on either one of these guys. But it may not be happening just yet. I don't think they're necessarily in decline as of yet. But yeah.
Yeah. So it's a tough fight to call. I think I'll be interested to see if Patricky's how talking to him about it. He really said this would be the cap of for him. This would really be meaningful for him is how far he's come since then. When I was at my lowest point, I lost to this guy. I never should have lost that fight, and now I can prove that again. And so it'll be interesting to see if that's true. I think it's something to prove for him. So odds on this, Friere is a slight favorite, -125 to -119. Anderson -115 to -109. So
wow, that's close.
Yeah, it is close to dead even. I can understand that Anderson's got a win over him already, but Friere's really looked good since then. And I mean, I expect to see Anderson keep improving, but out of that team he trains out of, I don't know how much dynamic improvement we can expect. How many big jumps we can expect him to make because he's got great. He's like, training with all the right people, learning all the right stuff in camp. Like Team Explode doesn't necessarily produce all the top shelf talent in the world.
Are you picking Pitbull, Zane?
Oh, I'm picking Pitbull. Yeah.
Okay.
So on that note,
I'm gonna have to ask you guys. Excuse me, just 1 second. I'll be right back.
All right, we'll lead with Eddie on the next one, and then you can dip in. Next one up, Daniel Vitel, Georgi Karkanyan. I am definitely excited for this fight.
Am I losing you, Zane? I think I'm losing you.
Are you? Shit. I didn't lose you, but apparently you lost me. Anyway,
Okay.
Vitel, Karkanyan, I'm excited for this. Tell me about it.
I'm definitely excited for this. Kind of unsure how it's going to go down exactly. Is it going to be fought on the ground, or is it going to be a kickboxing match? I'm not exactly sure. With this card, it's kind of weird because you got guys coming off of losses versus guys coming off of wins, and it's just kind of a weird thing that you don't normally see in the elite leagues, so to speak. But Daniel Vitel, I mean, he's been looking really good as of late. He suffered a really tough loss in his last fight against Patricio Pitbull, where, I mean, he had Pitbull dead to rights at the end of that first round. I mean, the ref could have stopped the fight, and I wouldn't have argued. I'd be like, okay, that's done. I mean, he had him hurt bad, and then starts the second round and comes out just overzealous, still trying to hunt for that finish, and got caught by a beautiful left hook. I mean, the most beautiful left hook I've ever seen. I mean, it just dropped him cold. And, it's a tough loss. It's a tough loss for him. He's a guy who's got decent pressure, decent venom in his hands. He will look for the takedown, although he doesn't normally do things when he does get the takedown. He lets guys up. And, he's fighting Georgi Karkanyan. I mean, you're not going to want to take that guy down, as we saw in his last fight when he fought my buddy Bubba Jenkins and brutally choked him unconscious to the point where he had to scream at the referee for the ref to stop the fight. That was tough to watch. But the guy's squeeze is ridiculous. Like, he's super good at choking people out. He's comfortable on his feet. He can throw some flashy kicks, some spinning kicks. Definitely lacks a certain I don't know what it is. I don't know if he fades late, but he fought Rick Glenn and he just looked really bad there in that second round. And I don't know if that's because he hurt his ribs or what the case might have been, but he didn't necessarily look on point after a dominant first round where his grappling is just leaps and bounds over most people. So it's kind of hard to gauge where this fight's going to take place. But I think that Vitel kind of loses to specialists, and I think Karkanyan is a specialist. And I think he has enough on his feet to keep Vitel at bay. And if it goes to the ground, I think Karkanyan has the advantage. So I'm going to go Georgi Karkanyan, probably a decision.
All right. Vic, what are your thoughts?
That was a very respectable argument that you made there, and I'm going to totally disagree with it, and I'll tell you exactly why. First off, this bout, you're wondering where it's going to take place. The answer is everywhere. I think this is going to take place standing. It's eventually going to end up in some crazy scrambles. It's going to have to end up at the ground at some point, and I'm not really sure who I would favor overall because both of those guys, neither one of these cats is a slouch. We've mentioned the virtues of Karkanyan on the ground, but Daniel Vitel is 35-9 as a professional fighter, 3 knockouts, 2 TKOs, and 21 submissions. Now, granted, he hasn't always fought world-class opposition, but he has fought some really good guys. It's not like he's fighting dudes that have had maybe 3-5 records or things like that all along the way. He's only got losses to guys like Dan Hardy, Paul Daly, earlier in his career, of course, Thiago Tavares, who's now in the UFC, and Patricio Pitbull. He did end up beating Dennis Seaver early on as well. Matt Bissett, Des Green, Pat Gurn, and Frodo Hasbulev. All of these wins have been he's shown a steady progression as a fighter. And in some of these, he's looked obviously much more flashy and sensational than others. But he's been able to fight a little bit more reserved as of late, and to come up with more of a winning formula to be able to outlast his opponents, or at least be more systemic with how he fights. So I have to favor him in this one, just by virtue of being a much more complete fighter. Certainly, he's going to have to mind his P's and Q's. This is not going to be a walk in the park, and this very well is. I'm calling this right now. This is going to be the fight of the night right here. Karkanyan, 24-4. Very exciting fighter. He's only lost to guys like Joe Warren, Patricio Pitbull, Rick Glenn in World Series of Fighting during his brief stint there. He did have that win against Bubba Jenkins. Did beat Lance Palmer as well. Other wins on his record: Michael Miller, Dean Thomas. Those are far earlier in his career. But he's another guy who started off in a non-combat sports background, ended up in MMA, and just started to take to it so naturally. And now he's just perhaps not the world beater that some people thought he would be at this point, but he doesn't seem like a guy who's too far removed from it. I really do think that maybe with another 2 years, he really will be able to blossom into his own. But right now, I got to take Vitel on this.
I don't know, this is interesting to me because these are two guys who have a lot of miles under their hood already.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Karkanyan has been fighting since 2006.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty damn regularly, in Vitel since like 2002, I think.
Yeah,
I believe so.
Yeah.
And Karkanyan's, Vitel is one of those cases where it's weird because it's sort of like he has kept getting better. Like, he looks like he's the best fighter he's ever been right now, and that always gives me I wonder about that, because it's sort of like, are we about to see like a sharp fall? Like, just somebody really hit the skids on that, because that's not how MMA tends to work. You don't tend to be the best fighter you've ever been.
So we beat the quota. This usually happens twice an episode. This is nice. Now we got this 3 times that you get interrupted by your internet stream. That's nice.
For fuck's sake.
No, to what you're saying, Zane, I mean, Vitel's been knocked out 5 times.
Yeah.
And you got that he got hit really hard in that Pitbull fight. I mean, he got hit blasted. And Vic, I think I have to disagree that Vitel is the more complete fighter. I can't necessarily say that. I think Vitel's has a bit porous striking defense. I mean, there's holes in his striking game. The way he defends punches and strikes, he kind of backs his head up.
I would say that Karkanyan doesn't wrestle at all. Like, I think that would be Vitel isn't as I would say Vitel's not nearly as good a pure striker as Karkanyan, but Vitel does actually have a wrestling game. Karkanyan's wrestling defense is submissions, and he's good at them. But it's sort of like, every time you try to take him down, he's going to be the guy that jumps for the guillotine. And if he doesn't get it, he's going to end up on his back.
True, but I mean, Vitel really doesn't have a top game. I mean, he lets guys up. He might get the takedown, but I mean, those guys are right back up. And Pat Curran actually held him down for a good part in the second round of their fight. So I'm not sure Vitel could even get off his back if he's put there.
I don't know. I would not pick Karkanyan to be a great top ride fighter personally in this bout. I don't think that's something he does a lot of. But I think I'm going to pick Karkanyan to win, just because I think he's a good enough submission artist to keep from getting submitted. And then I think he's the much more dangerous striker, or he's a much more dangerous fighter outside of grappling.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think either guy is going to get a submission. And Karkanyan seems like the fighter that's much more likely to land the better strikes.
All right.
But the odds on this have Vitel as the very slight favorite, -125 down to -119. Georgi Karkanyan, -115 to -109. They are the exact same odds as Anderson Friere. So.
Really tight odds on this one, on this whole card.
Yeah, I wouldn't put money on any of this stuff.
No. Which leads us then to the main event. I won't tell you what the odds are yet on that, but they're not great.
I'm
Josh
sorry.
Thompson.
Just give me one more second. Hang on. This is
Oh,
bloody elbow parenting, ladies and gentlemen. This is because really pulling out. Come on, why give up? Give me a second.
That last stroke is everything to him, huh?
that's right. Okay, Josh Thompson, Pablo Villaseca. Let's leave Vic's lack of family planning out of it, and Josh Thompson, Pablo Villaseca. You get to lead one more time, Eddie.
Yes. Well, let me go ahead and say follow me on Twitter at the Eddie Mercado. Give us a like on YouTube. Subscribe to MMANation.com. Read Bloody Elbow. All that jazz. All right. Josh Thompson, Pablo Villaseca. Why these two guys are fighting, I'm not exactly sure. But, Pablo Villaseca is a Chilean fighter who his last fight was in Argentina, and he did a really good job of fighting a nobody and ground and pounding him until he gave up a submission that he took. We did see him in Bellator as he lost a split decision to Bobby Cooper, which was an interesting fight. Villaseca did really well to start and then kind of faded late. And, some people say he won that fight. I personally don't agree. I think due to him gassing and getting outstruck from the outside, he really lost that fight. And, he's fighting Josh Thompson, who is a masteress in staying at range and picking people apart. I mean, I can't imagine what the odds are for this, but I'm sure they're extremely long. But Thompson, I'm a huge fan. I mean, probably top 5 knockouts of all time was when he fought Yves Edwards. And Yves did that flying head kick as Thompson did the spinning back fist and caught Thompson in the face.
That's not a great way to describe why you're such a big fan of Thompson.
He took it like a champ. But he's tough, man. I like his style. He throws pretty much every strike in the world. Jabs, crosses. He kind of got a bum deal in the UFC with a couple decisions not going his way. Mainly that Bobby Green fight. I think he won that fight. I feel like he got a raw deal there. But then he went on to fight Tony Ferguson, and that was tough to watch, man. He took a beating in that fight. He took a beating. So I'm glad to see him in Bellator fighting some lesser competition that he can stun on, so to speak. And I think Villaseca's that guy. I don't think Villaseca has the cardio to deal with the pace that Thompson pushes. So I can just see Thompson outclassing this guy, all day. And just for fun, I want to talk about when he kicked Nate Diaz in the head, because that was an enjoyable moment for me. Not that I don't like Nate Diaz, because I do, but just seeing him getting kicked in the head was just, and Nick Diaz throwing the towel in. We don't really get to see that, so that was a special treat for our old school fans who remember the days of the towel being thrown in. But
there
Josh
haven't been
Thompson.
many.
No, but Josh Thompson by a mile.
All right, Vic.
Yeah, I just want to address that one question that you had, Eddie. I think this has to do with contractual matters. Look, it probably has to do with they owe these guys fights or something like that. And Thompson wanted to fight in San Jose. He's made it a very clear point. He's a big draw there, so he'll probably sell a lot of tickets. I don't know why they're giving him this opponent. I mean, Villaseca is a talented guy, very pretty much undefeated in the South American circuit. He's only 10-1. But he's fought nowhere near the kind of competition that Thomson has. Thomson's 21-8. I don't think we need to go into the long list of notable opponents that he's fought. And even some of those losses, he has looked fantastic. I mean, he's really been a guy that, despite the mileage on his body, despite the injuries, despite the craziness that this sport has really brought on him, he had a bit of a bittersweet run in the UFC. He's still brought us some big moments. I still think he should have beaten Benson Henderson in their fight. The Nate Diaz fight was, no one finishes the Diaz brothers like that. So, he's a guy who's been fighting. He's 37. He's been fighting since 2001, but he's still got it. He's not fighting top shelf opposition anymore. He's not fighting, guys that are not far removed from UFC title fights. He came into Bellator and he fought Mike Brazoulis, and he ended up finishing him. And what was a bit of a, it wasn't a bad fight. probably just not the one-sided super styling that we expected. This might be it, though. And again, I like Pablo. I've seen some of the stuff that he's done in the South American circuit, but it's not as strong a circuit. The wrestling isn't there. The submission grappling is starting to really improve and pick up, but the striking isn't as good. And these are all symptoms of his game, too. Like, you notice that a lot of the things, he's putting things together very well, but there's still elements of an MMA striking game that is sort of rudimentary. It's all basically rooted in basic boxing and then trying to throw all the other stuff in. So I don't really see any avenues for him to win. He comes in, he makes his Bellator debut against journeyman Bobby Cooper, and he ends up losing by decision. Josh Thomson eats guys like Bobby Cooper for brunch with a slice of cantaloupe at the end. I mean, there's no real conceivable way that I see this happening. I mean, Thompson's got a chin on him, so he's not going to knock him out. His submission savvy is great. His submission defense as well. I just don't see any avenues for that to happen, barring some sort of fluke injury or something like that. So it's going to be it's kind of a sad thing that it has to happen like that. Like, I'm happy Josh Thompson's still getting paid and he's still getting out there and fighting, but no, not really that hype for this fight at all.
If I could just add real quick,
Yeah.
Thompson has a very high FIQ.
Oh,
I just had to get it in there.
my G, I'd do it if the boy wasn't falling asleep in my arms right now. I'd totally do the sound. I ain't doing it now. Oh,
All
look.
right.
There you go.
I will say it also doesn't help Villaseca that he's kind of small for a lightweight. 5'7". Seems a little beefy. Like when he fought Cooper, he looked a little like, he looked a little like an out of shape featherweight. Frankly.
Yeah, weight cutting still hasn't really been perfected in the South America. I've been watching a lot of those fights lately.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
But watching him fight, he does have, I would say he has a reasonably surprisingly complete MMA game. Like, he wrestles pretty decently, he grapples all right, he strikes pretty well, and he's really aggressive. It's just, there's not a lot of nuance in his game. There's not a lot of, like, small things. It's sort of like, I'm going to throw my whole body at you, and, he's used to fighting guys who, when you hit him hard, they go away. And
Yeah, that's not Josh Thompson at all.
Nope.
No. So, not a lot here. I think the big reason they're doing this is, it's interesting. I was going to say they might be, I know Thompson's angling to be on that Risen card. That's his goal, is he wants to win this and then fight New Year's Eve on Risen in Japan. But I could also see them angling for, like, a Friere Thomson matchup down the road, but I know that if Friere doesn't get a title shot after this fight, he's going to 145. So that's another thing that's kind of like, I think this is really just about getting Josh Thomson in the door with Bellator and getting him in front of fans a couple of times. It's the Coker build-up is give him somebody that looks good, that has an interesting record, that's aggressive, that's going to make the fight fun, but somebody that that the guy you want to build can beat, and then you get him into that big fight off a couple of wins. Here.
Is that 4 or 5? I lost count.
Zane's got the dial-up internet today.
Ah, shit. Okay, well, on that note, here are the odds. Josh Thompson's the favorite, minus 1380 to minus 1500.
That's crazy.
And Pablo Villaseca, plus 820 to plus 700. So
Wow.
I'm going to wrap this shit up because my internet is failing constantly, and that's getting really annoying. Find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. You can find
me on Twitter at Eddie Mercado.
You can find Vic.
I love the way you picked that up, Eddie. That was beautiful. Great stuff. Great stuff.
You can find Vic on Twitter at VicMRodriguez.
Yes.
Follow us all at bloodyelbow.com and follow MMANation.com. That's DOTCOM over on YouTube. Subscribe to that. You'll get all our interviews, all our videos, all the other content we produce using a shitty-ass webcam and internet feed. Give this video a thumbs up if you can stand to not hear me say complete sentences.
Boom.
That helps us out a lot. And we will see you all
also.
next week.
Get in the comment section.
That's right. Get in the comment section. Try not to say any racist shit, because
Yeah.
we will. I personally will file a YouTube complaint against you, and you know,
And freeze.
Yes. And shout out to the guy who keeps
God.
telling us that we need to get into the same house and record this with live mics. I like that guy. I want to give him a hug. Also, shout out to the people that I've quite obviously banned and they jump in and talk shit about me because they make my day.
All right. On that note, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you all next week.